I mean, that was a very depressing topic, Amos. Maybe we could lighten it up with something that I'm sure is very near and dear to your heart, which is the premiere of Star Trek Picard. I don't know if you want to touch on that.
Okay, everyone, spoiler alert. Before we go further, spoilers. Star Trek Picard. I mean, what did you think of it? You and I both watched the first episode.
All right, so I'll be upfront. I'm not the biggest. I'm probably more of a Star Trek fan than a Star Wars fan, but not hardcore because as you and I both know, I could not get through Deep Space Nine, for instance, and it took me a while to get in, even to Voyager, which actually turned out to be a very good show. But the only reason I watched because Seven of Nine was fucking hot and had massive tits. That's why I watched the entire season, right?
And she's going to be back in Picard.
I know. It's the best news I've ever heard. But yeah, I do like the series. I watched Enterprise. I watched the original series, Next Generation, all of the movies. Deep Space Nine. I will give Deep Space Nine another try when I've got the time.
Yeah, you better.
And I did not get through the STD, Star Trek Discovery. I watched the first season. I struggled to watch the last episode of season 1. Then she got through that, watched the first season of season 2, and just like, no, fuck this shit, right? And it's the same. I think it's the same showrunner that's doing Picard. So I got into it, and it definitely wasn't as bad as the STD, but it had a lot of the same tropes of the STD. You know, they had a Mary Sue, another perfect woman. Basically, you know, spoiler. You know, what's the girl's name in the thing? Daj.
But
yeah,
okay,
Daj.
you got to keep it in context.
Why I'm going to preface it. But again, it's the same. It's this guy. It has his fingerprints all over it. So yes, Daj is the character, and you know she doesn't know that we don't know for sure, but the speculation is that she is the offspring of design of Data, so a positronic brain inside of a human body. At least that's what the leaks have been saying.
She's like a more humanoid looking, a more natural looking android. Yeah.
So I mean, that's the premise. The premise of the leaks were that it's a positronic brain in a physical body. Like, so she's fully human. It's just the brain is actually an android.
So she is still limited by her physical body in terms of that, but she still operates like because there's parts where they're showing
it falls apart. Hold on, let me finish what I'm saying.
Yeah,
because it doesn't fully work. Seeing as some of the stunts that she performed in the movie, it doesn't really fully come together. But anyway, okay, fine. It's an interesting premise. I'm glad it wasn't a Borg. When I first watched the previews and stuff, it's like, oh god, it's a Borg thing. What I didn't like was what they did to Picard. They really castrated Picard. You know, there is a scene, again, spoilers, there's a scene where he's being interviewed and he's talking to his, 2 Romulan refugees that are in his house. And, he's about to be interviewed by this major network and he's like asking them, did you ask them not to, ask me this question about why I left Starfleet? And it was just so weak and feeble. I mean, this is a man who lived on confrontation and diplomacy and all of these different types of things. You know, he was just completely gutted. Now, I don't know if that's the plan. I don't know if the plan is basically he's a broken spirit, that kind of thing. And then he does like a hero's journey and kind of recaptures.
That'd be all right. I mean, I
if
think
that's the case.
I have a feeling that's where it's going, and
I hope that's where
I'm glad that would be if that is the case. But
yes, I agree. So just to sum it up, overall, I thought it was definitely better than Star Trek Discovery, which I'm not even going to watch the second season. It was good. There were a couple editing mistakes as well. I think Nerdrotic pointed out at 1 minute 52 seconds, Picard and Data are playing poker, and Picard is laughing, and they immediately cut to a scene where he's not laughing, like he's stoic. It's a very amateur edit. So I hope it gets better. I have a lot of hopes for it.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting story. Like, I can see why he probably was broken. I mean, he had this you know, they. Do you think we should go into why he got broken down? Uh, what do you think of that whole storyline of why he was, why did he leave Starfleet and protest sort of the whole thing with the Romulans?
It was, it's obviously a continuation of what Nemesis, I think there was the story with the Romulans, and,
so the Romulans were like starting to, so Nemesis, they were like, Romulans were, I guess, starting to be on friendlier terms with humans, but then they kind of left it at that. It's more so the reboots. So the first reboot, when Spock comes back from the future, he says Romulus was destroyed. So they're taking,
and the guy came back and destroyed Falcon.
right. So and that's now it's the Kelvin timeline, So
right. Yeah,
so the prime timeline they're saying is okay, like in Spock's timeline, which is the prime timeline, which is where all the other shows are part of. Romulus is still destroyed. So they're kind of following that timeline, and it's like now Romulus is sort of like the equivalent of what Vulcan was in the reboot movie. It's kind of,
and even that I struggled with because Romulus it's not a planet; it's an empire, right? They got
but if their main planet gets destroyed, and it's the same thing with like the Federation. If Earth got annihilated,
it would be a blow.
It would still be the majority of humans.
Right. Sure.
Like if you looked at like during that time period, I'd say less than 10% of the world's of human populations live on colonies and starships.
Oh, okay.
So if it would be a major blow. Like you look right now, I think they haven't stated how many Romulans are still alive, but there are still those out there. It's enough that their empire is essentially in ruins. Whenever you start watching DS9, you'll see a similar pattern play out with another race of people in Star Trek. Okay. Basically, it's not so much that they're eradicated as it is they're just blown to such a point where like they're gonna have to rebuild their empire or their whatever there is for like at least the next century kind of thing. Find a new planet, resettle, rebuild. There's going to be a huge relief effort from all the surrounding whatever they would be called, the powers of the Alpha Quadrant, all this stuff.
Right.
So that is a pretty large undertaking that they were trying to do.
Sure.
Kind of.
I suppose I could get that,
and I get why he probably him. It is a little bit of a loftier goal than he usually went for.
Right.
Like Picard, as much as he was like a principled, sort of this very idealistic individual, this would have been really pushing it, I think, for sort of his idealistic limit. Like, he wasn't all just sunshine and rainbows and everything's peaceful all day because we're the part of the Federation. We're just peaceful humans. It wasn't quite that. Yeah. But it was like this was like pushing that. Like, it is valid to say, Romulans, they're the oldest enemy of the Federation. He goes, but they're people. It's like, yeah. I'm not saying what he did was wrong. Yeah, he's hinting at that. It's a little bit of that like refugee, people we don't like kind of thing. But at least it wasn't. I'm glad they haven't put in any make the Federation or Starfleet great again or anything, or even remotely coming close to that.
We have about 2 more episodes on Earth, so don't count your chickens before they hatch. They might have.
I know. I'm saying that yet. The commentary, they're keeping it. It's definitely commentary.
Yeah.
But it's a little more. It's more subtle than they probably would like to be. Like it's there, like you really got to kind of dig at it, but it's not like a straight up in your face, like, oh, this is totally talking about this. Because, even in your next generation, when they would tackle different issues, it wasn't, as far as we know, it wasn't really reflecting upon any specific time. Like they didn't put out an episode because of something that happened that week.
Sure. Well, they couldn't tell because it took longer to produce in those days. But yeah, I get your point. I mean, they did speak. The original series did speak to the Cold War. I mean, that's basically what the Klingons were there for. It's like they did speak to the issue of race. They did speak to, I mean, all of it. The first interracial kiss.
But they would do it all. Yeah, they would do it
within
all
the story. Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't like, oh, this week we're going to do this because this, like, it's not so much like how South Park every week they tend to try to reflect what's going on in public.
Yeah, because it only takes like 4 days to render, like a week to do a show kind of thing. So you can kind of do it in the week.
So
kind of like our podcast.
Right. So yeah, Star Trek was good to like kind of keep the topics mixed and balanced so that you weren't going too far into one over the other. Even with this one, I'd say so far they're doing all right. You did notice though, like there is something with the Borg.
Yeah.
There will be something with the Borg, but it's not like it wasn't the jumping off point. It wasn't like, oh, we're going to start with the Borg. They're probably going to be talking about multiple things going on throughout the show.
Yeah,
there's going to be this whole android thing. There's going to be some Borg thing. There's probably going to be something with like, confronting some sort of corruption within Starfleet and stuff, which is all valid. I mean, those were all present with a lot of the spin-off shows, showing that like the Federation and Starfleet and all this, they weren't as idealistic as like Roddenberry kind of painted it like the Federation could really do no wrong.
Yeah.
But
then,
that's not true. But then as we go on, it was kind of like, okay, for most people, it seems that way. But there's always going to be certain things in the shadows that you're just never going to quite hear about. There's always going to be a little bit of a cover-up somewhere.
They did have some big fuck-ups, apparently. I don't know if you remember the movies, the Genesis bomb, Star Trek 2, I think. So this is with the still Captain Kirk and all these guys. Massive experiment, to re-terraform a planet kind of thing. And I think that's how they revived Spock in that whole thing. And then eventually, of course, the planet rips itself apart. I mean, yeah, you just blew up a planet, like, their Death Star. Good job. Like, So yeah, the Federation is not far off on their fuck-ups, They do make a couple mistakes.
Yeah. And they're not always going to. I mean, even Next Generation, they touched on like, different admirals or something would have some agenda that was not quite in line. I mean, the movies, you remember Insurrection, where they were going to relocate a whole bunch of people without their consent, kind of thing.
Yeah, move them.
And then they made it. They kind of made it touch on like relocation of like natives.
Yeah,
but it's but then the way they go about it wasn't like tackling any specific group of people or whatever. It was like talking about Native Americans being relocated in today's age. I mean, it's definitely a relevant topic to kind of show in sci-fi in a way, but at the same time, it's not a thing that's like so virtue signaling, like, ooh, we care so much. It's like it's an older issue that people talk about.
Yeah. I agree.
Whereas
what did you think of the show,
though? First episode so far, I think I told you, it was flat but not bad.
Yeah, not bad. I'll agree with that.
It was just